I'm Cristina. I'm from the University of Southampton. And today I'm going to talk to you about my PhD research, which is combining the two areas I've been training on since I've started uni, that are Etruscan archaeology and museum studies. Indeed, this is my research question. And basically what I'm trying to do is to analyze how the Etruscan civilization has been represented and interpreted by archaeologists and how the latter has been received by the public inside Italian museums. So I'm using the museum as a space for a critical investigation. Before we move on, I know that probably some of you are wondering who the Etruscans are. And so here's a bit of context for you. The Etruscan civilization is one of the most important developing in the Italian peninsula during the first millennium before Christ. And something important to know is that they were a cultural and ethnic unit sharing language, costumes, but they were never a political union. So they used to be organized in independent city-states, and you can see some of them are listed here in the map. So now that we have a little bit of information, we can move on to the actual topic of the presentation, that is the Etruscan Museumscape. And I decided to start it with this quote because I think it combines well Etruscans and museums, because it's from D.H. Lawrence. He's an English author who traveled through Italy during the fascist period, and he visited several Etruscan sites. He was so pleased with them, he wrote a book about them. And of course, in his journey, he visited several museums, which he didn't really like so much. But he makes a point about the connection between museums and Etruscans. Indeed, one of the first museums ever established in Italy, it's an Etruscan one, and it was created in the 16th century in Tuscany, in Volterra. And of course, also museums have a strong connection with archaeology, even if I have to say archaeologists for a long time took kind of for granted museums, using them to draw information at people or using them as a space to store finds. And it was just with the post-processual turn that archaeologists started to problematize the way in which they construct meaning inside museums. And here I put an influential quote by Shanks and Tilly. And those ideas on meaning making were taken on board by people working in archaeological representation, and especially representation produced for the non-archaeologists, and how those representations actually influence our work as professional. Indeed, if the power of representation lies with few, the subjective response is owned by many. And in this sense, you can see I'm shifting my attention from archaeology and museums to the public. And this is also one of the main claims by public archaeology. And I think all of these ideas tie well with a recently developed investigation field, that is critical heritage studies. And people working in this field consider heritage as a process, as a cultural process through which we construct the past in the present. And this relationship between past and present, I think, is a key one to study museums. But how exactly can we do so? So I'm studying both representation, so the museum layout, the way things are displayed, but also reception, that is how people interact with the subject. And the reception can be both one based on meaning, on intellect, but it can also be one based on emotion, feeling, embodiment. And for this reason, non-representational theory, it's something that is really useful, but we will see this later on. Stepping into one of my case studies, the National Etruscan Museum of Villa Giulia in Rome, the first thing that I did was to actually visit the museum. And so I'm using knowing as visiting as knowing as a methodology. And I started analyzing space. So you can see the use of space is really transparent, is a really organized, linear layout, gallery-like layout. So the visitor knows since the entrance, basically, what is going to see in the following rooms. And this idea resonated in my mind with the writers working in the field of museum studies, and especially in the investigation of space. And here I quoted the long-short model by Zorzi, who basically states that the higher the organization of the space, the higher the control of the message. So the image of the Etruscans that we are getting from this space layout is an image of a really structured civilization, something that is manageable, that we can know. I then moved on to analyze the panels, and I've applied initially a quantitative method, examining how words were connected and repeated in the panels, and three main themes were coming out: material culture, of course, because this is an archaeological museum. The funerary world has most of big part of research on the Etruscans, especially at the beginning, was focusing on necropolis and topography. Topography is connected to the organization of the museum itself, because it is organized by cities. So we start with the first city that is analyzed from its beginnings to its end, and then we move on to the next city from the beginning to its end. So the entire museum is structured this way, and this is also reflected in the panels. I then coded the panels, and through the coding, I've noted that actually the dominant themes that were coming out were not so much focusing on geography, but rather on chronology, so number, dates. And so the geographical elements remains just in the organizational space rather than in the actual description of the panels. So this is for what concerns the museum in itself. Then I wondered how people who work in that museum approach their representation of the past. And so I've analyzed video tours they produced. They are available on their YouTube channel, on video tours of the museum, thematic exploration of the collections, and analyzing those quantitatively. Immediately, verbs were coming out of the graph. And so they are deeply related with a human element. I will show you better now. I've created here a comparison. So you can see the panels are speaking about this important Etruscan masterpiece. It's the sarcophagus of the spouses. And the panels speak about terracotta production, the layout of the couple, while the videos of the archaeologists speak about an entirely different thing. That is the ability of the artwork to create a relationship with those who look at it. And the same is true, for example, for this other case on ex voto. The panels speak about terracotta, types, the 4th century BC, while the archaeologists are talking about people with their prayers, ambitions, fears. So there is a human element that is completely absent from the narrative in the panels and in the display, and which is instead pursued by the archaeologists. And now we move on to analyze the last element, that is the visitor perspective. And visitor studies are an established field of museum studies, but unfortunately in archaeology, not so many people have addressed how people perceive the past in the museums. So I've decided to use the personal mimic map method. So I've approached visitors before and after their entrance into the galleries. And I've asked them to draw a map, insert words, or do any drawings, anything really that they connected to the central topic, that is the Etruscans. And then I've used the map to start an interview with the participants and to explore better their ideas. I was able to collect 42 units. I speak about units because some of the visitors worked alone and some others worked in pairs. And then I coded all the maps and the interviews. And these are the main themes that are coming out on the left. And analyzing the differences between the before and after the visits, three main themes were standing out: place, landscape, and territory, museum and collections, and heritage. Of course, museum and collection is quite self-evident, because before the visit, people don't speak so much about this aspect, while after the visit, they are more keen into giving me information on this. While places, landscape, territory, and heritage still remains to be investigated. And so I went deep a little bit deeper. And this is one of the maps that was drawn by two architects. You see on the left the before and on the right the after. And the before is much more messy than the after. Of course, this is one of the effects of the visit. But the same kind of idea is remaining. They're talking about landscape, they're drawing a landscape. And literally, if you type on Google Etruscan landscape, this is the first image that it comes out. So even before the visit, they have this clear idea of landscape and geography in their mind. And also all the visitors who did not draw, but prefer to write or to tell me, they speak about the landscape. They speak about geography, places they used to live, a sunny and warm place of Italy, some kind of geographical heritage. And so clearly the geographic theme is present, but the key question is how are they speaking of geography? And especially how they're connecting this to the idea of heritage. So you can see the last quote. Some people say that they have a connection with the Etruscan territory, and for this reason, they connect them with their origins, their idea of memory, identity, bond. So in thinking about all of these aspects and trying to connect them all together, I think cultural geography can be an important tool. And indeed, in one of the few studies investigating visitors to museums, in 1991, Merriman concluded that there are two different ways to approach the past. One is a personal past that is made of feelings, memories, emotions, and an impersonal heritage that instead is based on dates, chronologies, facts. And I think this finding by Merriman actually resonates with an influential article by one of the leading scholars studying the Etruscans in Italy, that is Massimo Pallottino, who wrote about the existence of two different and separated Etruscan landscape, one belonging to scholars, so accurate, scientific, and another one, an imaginative one, belonging to popular culture, to people. And I think we should reframe our way we consider these issues, because there is not a personal past and an impersonal heritage, and there are not two different Etruscan landscape. There is just one past and one heritage. What it changes is the way we approach it. And archaeologists are not the only one with the ability to think about the past. Also, people do it, but do it in a different way. And in this sense, non-representational, modern representational theory can help us, because people working in this field consider our perception of the world and also of the past as combining meaning and mind and representation with embodied reactions, memories, feelings that maybe are not so dealing with knowledge, but with other different aspects. And so we should aim to construct what Weatherton and Watson call a semiotic landscape of heritage that can include inside it all of these different stances. And so this is what I hope I proved in my study. And this is also the end of my presentation. I thank you all for listening, the University of Southampton and my supervisor, Stephanie Moser, and the Wolfson Foundation, which is funding my research. And I'm happy to take some questions if you have some.